Ms. Duddy, depositing cellular DNA surface doesn't necessarily eliminate other genetic material on the same surface, correct?
That's correct.
It's not like there can only be one person's DNA on a particular surface at any given time, correct?
Well, it depends if only one person's touched that surface. Then it would only be their DNA that's there, and like I mentioned, if there are environmental factors, if it's been cleaned or not. So depending on the surface you're talking about, how that would be most appropriately answered.
Right, but let's say someone touched one surface once and then another person touched the surface. It doesn't mean that the first person's DNA automatically goes away just because somebody else touched it.
Oh, no.
That's why we have DNA mixtures and so forth, correct?
Correct.
And you talked in direct examination about sloughing. That's the process by which our skin cells come off of our body.
Yes.
We don't all slough at the same rate, do we?
No.
Everybody sloughs at a different rate.
Yes.
And when you're swabbing a surface to collect cellular material, there are a number of factors that go into whether or not you'll be able to lift a sample that the crime lab can later analyze and make conclusions about with respect to DNA. Is that true? That was maybe a long question. But there are a number of factors that go into whether or not what you swab ultimately turns into a DNA sample that from which conclusions can be drawn.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's going to depend on the environment that the surface is on, what type of surface it is, how many people have touched it, you know, how hard, how many times. So numerous different environmental factors that will affect, is there going to be enough DNA there that when swabbed will be able to be identified in the lab.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
Anything else from the state? No, Your Honor. You may step down. Pavlovich. He came from over there this time. You know, this, raise your right hand, you know this. Do you swear or affirm your testimony in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon.
Can you state your first and last name and spell both, if you would?
My name is Detective John K. Pavlovich. John is J-O-H-N. Pavlovich is P-A-V-L-O-V-I-C-H. I'm commonly referred to as Jake, however.
Who do you currently work for?
I'm a detective with the Major Crimes Unit in the King County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the King County Sheriff's Office in total?
I transferred here in July of 1994.
Prior to King County, did you have other law enforcement experience?
I did. From March of 1989 through June of 94, I was a police officer in Butte, Montana.
With the King County Sheriff's Office, what different jobs have you held?
From 94 until 97, I worked a patrol in the Southwest Precinct, which incorporates White Center, Burien, and SeaTac and Skyway. From 97 to 2000, I stayed at that precinct, but I moved into a street crimes unit, which is a plainclothes detective unit where we focus on street-level narcotics, neighborhood problems, and vice. From 2000 until 2002, I went back to patrol as a master patrol officer training position. In 2002, I joined the Green River homicide investigations when Gary Ridgway was arrested. And from there, I transferred directly into the Major Crimes Unit in 2003.
I want to talk about the Nicole Pietz investigation. At some point, did you become involved in working on that homicide investigation?
I did. I picked this case up in September of 2010, just about 3 years ago.
And let me just make sure to clarify, you were not one of the original detectives assigned to it back in 2006. Is that right?
I was not. I was in the unit at that time. However, I was working on other cases.
In 2010 or after that, did you become a part of a unit that looks into older cases that haven't yet been charged or solved?
Yes, in 2009, my primary responsibility was to work on open and unsolved homicides.
And is that why you ended up picking up and starting to work on Nicole Pietz's case?
I did. I was aware of the case back in 2006 and throughout the time up until 2010. And shortly after Detective Crenshaw promoted and transferred out, I picked up the case when he left.
And when you took over the investigation, did you familiarize yourself with all the reports from other law enforcement officers, witness statements, essentially everything that was part of that file at that time?
Yes, I did for several days.
I want to focus on your testimony today on a few different areas. And the first is, I want to ask whether you were familiar as part of the investigation or your review of the investigation that information had been found that Nicole Pietz may have stopped at Les Schwab on January 27th to have a tire fixed.
Yes, I was aware that she had stopped there. It was in several of the detectives' reports, as well as copies of the Les Schwab receipts that were in the case file.
And were you familiar, or did you become familiar with the address and location of that particular Les Schwab?
I did.
Did you also become familiar with information that had been derived from the investigation that she may have also stopped at a Taco Time location on that same evening?
Yes, basically the same way. Other detectives had discovered that receipt had been found, and I reviewed that information as well.
Now, I want to talk for a second. There's been some testimony previously about mileage on Nicole Pietz's Jetta. Were you familiar, or when you reviewed the investigation, did you become familiar with how many miles appeared to have been driven on the car from when it was worked on at Les Schwab until it was recovered in the University District?
Yes, I knew that it was 67 miles.
And was that important for investigators to know?
Yes, it was.
And during the course of the investigation prior to your involvement, was it your understanding that investigators had previously attempted or driven to various locations that were important in this investigation?
Yes, different detectives had driven to different locations. However, no one had actually done it in entirety by themselves. They had done it in conjunction with each other, so I had determined nobody had actually done it on their own.
And do you know if anybody had driven to important points of interest in this investigation during the nighttime hours, after midnight?
No, everything I read indicated they had done so during daytime or evening hours, never after midnight.
Yeah, I just have interested to type. Sure. Yeah. Let me turn this. No, that. That's. Thank you. Okay. I think it's good. Yeah. So, Detective Pavlovich, I want to talk about that and ask if you yourself then took it upon yourself at some point during your work on the investigation to, in fact, drive to different points of interest in this case.
I did in July of 2013.
And was that done to determine mileage between different locations? Was it done to determine the mileage between different locations?
Yes, it was.
Was it also done to determine how long it might take to drive to different locations?
Yes, I wanted to determine not only mileage, but time it took to do the travel, and also under similar conditions.
I asked you previously about a Les Schwab location and a Taco Time location. Did you drive at some point from the Les Schwab location to the Time location to the condominium where the Pietzs lived?
I had driven that particular route several times from 2010 to 2013 as I worked on the case. There would be different times I would be up in that area and drive that route as I was going by.
And I didn't ask you this, but were you familiar with the exact address of the condominium that the Pietzs had lived at?
I knew it. I don't know if I can recite it right now, but I did know the address, yes.
When you drove from Les Schwab to Taco Time to the condominium, were you able to determine how many miles that was?
5.6 miles.
And that was not something you just did in July, you're saying you did that previously?
I had done that on a couple of different occasions, yes.
Were you also familiar from becoming a part of the investigation as to the location where Ms. Pietz's body had been recovered?
Yes, I was very familiar with that area.
And that was in the Burien area?
Yes, off of South 144th in Des Moines, a little bit to the west of that intersection.
Now, when you drove to some of these locations in July of 2013 during the night, did you also drive from the Pietz condominium to the location where Nicole Pietz's body had been found?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to ascertain how many miles it was from those two, between those two locations?
From the condominium to the point where her body was found was 34.3 miles.
And let me just ask you, because I'm asking you a bunch of questions, do you have any idea, or can you know exactly what streets or roads or routes that car may have been driven on?
In February, January of 2006?
Yep, January or February of 2006.
No, at the time Nicole was reported to have disappeared, I do not know for sure where the car was driven that morning.
And so not knowing exactly where, how did you determine what routes to take when you were doing things like what you just testified to, going from the condominium to where her body had been found?
Two reasons. When you're working on a homicide case, you start to develop evidence, either direct or circumstantial or a combination of the two. As you develop that evidence, you start to develop a theory about what happened during, in this case, during the murder, from beginning to end. At some point, you'll want to try to verify those theories or check them to see how accurate they may be. The other reason I wanted to drive these distances was the defendant's own statements in 2006 as to what time he had last seen the victim, Nicole, and where he said she had gone.
And I want to ask you one more question. You said it was 34.3 miles from the condominium to the site where her body was found. Did you use a particular freeway or route when you drove that?
That was going directly south on I-5 from the condominium to the body site.
And was that also done after midnight, during the nighttime hours?
Yes, it was.
Now, were you also familiar during your investigation with the location where Nicole Pietz was scheduled to attend an AA meeting for her sobriety birthday?
Yes, the King of Kings Church in Renton.
And did you also drive from the Pietz condominium to the King of Kings Church to determine how many miles that would be?
I did, and I took two different routes. I drove from the condominium using I-405 and also using I-5, which would be the two most direct and most plausible routes for someone to have taken.
Now, the other detectives who had done some driving in this case had driven this prior to you becoming involved. Is that right?
They had.
And at the time you became involved, did you have any reason to believe she'd ever made it to that location?
No, I did not.
So why did you drive that route then in July of 2013?
I wanted to see how it fit with some of the theories I had developed, to see if it fit within the total mileage that had been put on the car from Les Schwab until the time it was recovered. That's 67 miles. I wanted to see if it was possible to for someone to have driven the car down there.
Driven to the King of Kings Church?
To the King of Kings Church, yes.
And you talked about two different routes you used. Using the Interstate 405 route, how many miles did you determine it was from the condominium to the King of Kings Church?
That is 34.3 miles.
And using the Interstate 5 route from the condominium to the King of Kings Church, how many miles was that?
35.3 miles.
You already mentioned earlier that you were familiar with the location where Ms. Pietz's body was found.
Yes, I am.
I want to ask you a question about another route that you may have driven, and that is, did you drive the route between the King of Kings Church to the place where Ms. Pietz's body was recovered?
Yes, I did.
And how far was that in mileage?
Approximately 8.6 miles.
Did you have to drive on any main freeways or things like that to get from between those two locations?
From the King of Kings Church to where the body was recovered, where Nicole was found, I went down back to 405, hopped on 405 southbound, merged into Highway 518 westbound like you're heading to the airport, and got off on the One Memorial Drive, which was very close to where she was found.
And Detective, you were familiar as well, were you, with the location where the Jetta was recovered?
Yes, in the University District.
And did you drive, again, during these nighttime hours, from the location where Ms. Pietz's body was found to the location where the Jetta was recovered?
I did.
And how many miles was that?
Approximately 18.2 miles.
And did you have to travel on a major freeway of some kind for that?
Again, on that route, I went back on 518, merged onto I-5 northbound, and got off on Northeast 45th Street. From there, there's many different ways you could get down to where the car was found. You can take a ride on 9th, 12th, 15th, work your way back, so that's going to vary a little bit, but from there I went down to where the car was found, and that was 18.2 miles.
Now, have you previously, or if you did add up certain mileage, I want to ask you a question. If you added up the mileage from the Les Schwab to the condo, and from the condo to the body location, and from the body location to where the Jetta was recovered, have you calculated or can you calculate how many miles that would take according to what you were able to ascertain?
I could calculate that, so it would be 5.6 plus 34.3 plus another 18.2, so 34, 52, 52.5, 57, about 58.3. I should do that with a pen and paper.
And do you, if you want to do math, if you need to write something down, I can give you a pen just to make sure. I should give you a calculator. I'm sure you can probably just, well, why don't you go ahead and calculate what you believe that?
Thank you. And that's Les Schwab to the condo, condo to the recovery site of Nicole, and from there to where the vehicle was found?
Correct.
$58.1.
Okay. And how many miles were on the car?
67.
And is it fair to say that if someone was driving around to find a location to dump a body or a car, they might have to drive a few extra miles?
Objection, speculation. It's irrelevant.
I don't think the jury can answer that question as well as he can.
I'm gonna ask. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Did you say sustained?
The objection sustained.
Thank you, Detective. I want to ask you for another
I was sustaining the objection, basically saying you were making argument.
Okay. Thank you.
And that will be for later.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to ask you to calculate a different set of numbers, if you would, Detective. What would be the calculation if you added the Les Schwab to the condo mileage to the King of Kings Church, the King of Kings Church to the body site, and then the body site to the Jetta? And I recognize you did two different routes, So if you could first use the mileage from the Interstate 405 route.
That would be 61.1 miles if you're using the 405 route. Correction, I didn't add in the Les Schwab. That would be 66.7 miles.
And how about if you did the same calculation, but you used the Interstate 5 mileage?
67.7 miles if you use the I-5 route.
Now, Detective Pavlovich, did you also attempt, when you were doing this driving during the night, to figure out how much time it took you to do this travel between these various places?
I did.
And what did you come up with?
If I were to use the I-405 route and make all stops, in other words, condominium to the King of Kings, to the site on Des Moines where Nicole was found, and then to the location where the Jetta was recovered along I-405, it was 1 hour and 18 minutes.
I'm sorry, an hour and 18?
1 hour, 18 minutes.
And I should ask
Could
you,
you please repeat that again? I'm sorry, I missed that. Which route was that you talked about?
That would be using 405 as the main route.
And that's the one to the King of Kings and then to the dump and then back to the UW?
Yes, sir.
And what was the time, did you say?
1 hour and 18 minutes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, do you have another question?
Thank you, yes, I appreciate it.
And that was using the Interstate 405?
Correct.
Did you try to calculate it using the Interstate 5, or did you only do that for the Interstate 405?
No, I did it using the I-5 route as well, and that took 1 hour and 13 minutes.
And I should ask, did you drive a particular speed, or what were you traveling at?
I stayed between 60 to 65, wanted to stay within normal conditions, normal speed limit. On the freeways and on the surface streets, I went between 25 and 30.
Thank you. Detective, as part of your investigation, were traffic maps obtained for the night or actually early morning of January 28th for the relevant areas, Seattle area, surrounding area?
Yes, traffic congestion maps for January 28, 2006, from about midnight until 9 o'clock that morning.
Stacy's at 52 with the mark.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 52. Are these the maps that were changed?
Yes, these are the maps that come in 20-minute increments.
And were those obtained from the Washington State Department of Transportation?
Yes, it was.
And can you verify, are they indeed from, as you said, midnight to 9 a.m. on the 28th?
They are. They run from January 28, 2006, from midnight until 9 a.m.
And I would offer Exhibit
52.
52 at this time.
Objection.
Minute.
And Detective Pavlovich, can you just describe a little bit about how those records work, what they show, essentially?
Basically, they show the major freeways in Puget Sound, pretty similar to what you might see on TV in the morning now. I-5, I-405, 518, West Seattle Bridge, places like that, I-90, 520 Bridge, and they're color-coded. Green means traffic is normal and open. Red means there's some type of heavy congestion, and colors in between indicate the levels of that congestion. Yellow is moderate. White means no data. So some areas they didn't have any data for, but for 405 and I-5, they're pretty comprehensive.
They have the data for that, for those freeways.
Yes,
Have you previously reviewed these maps?
I have.
And how would you describe essentially those main freeways during that time period? Were they essentially open? Were they blocked?
From midnight until 9 that morning, both I-5 and 405 showed no congestion, with the exception of 740 that morning, or 20 to 8, where there's a little bit of congestion, red congestion, in a small area on northbound 5, just at the south end of Boeing Field. Very small area there. stop and go and heavy. At 7:40 in the morning, northbound 5 at the south end of Boeing Field.
And does that continue to a certain point or all the way till these maps end?
It goes from 7:40, by 8 o'clock it shows clear. So it was a very brief slowdown for some reason.
And I may have missed this. What, from where to where on I-5 was that approximately?
Looks like a very short section of I-5 just at the south end of Boeing Field.
Thank you, Detective. Did you also obtain information about whether there was a bus that would run from the University District to the Ashway Park and Ride near the Pietz condominium?
Yes, I did. There are several buses in that area, obviously, but there is one route that you can pick up on 45th Street near the freeway on-ramp that goes to the Ashway, or I think it's Ashway Park and Ride, that is not far from the Pietz condominium.
And do you know what route that is?
I believe it's the 511.
And did you yourself at some point travel to the Ashway Park and Ride?
Yes, I went to that park and ride.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
I wanted to see how far it was from the condominium and if I could get from there to the condominium on foot.
Did you determine the distance between the Ashway Park and Ride and the Pietz condominium?
1.7 miles.
I neglected to put this out. 1.7?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you yourself travel by foot from this park and ride to the Pietz condominium?
I did.
And what time of day or night were you doing this?
It was just about 6 o'clock in the morning. I did it on foot and kind of a light jog, a trot, and it took me about 13 minutes.
And I'm sorry, how long did it take you?
About 13 minutes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would offer this for illustrative purposes at this time.
No objection.
That means you will not get it back in the jury. It may be used.
Detective, I don't have any other questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that all you have today? That's a question directed to the state.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
My, that, the list you gave me this morning, that completes it.
It does, Your Honor. We're a little bit early, and I apologize again, but that is our last witness for today.
All right. It appears that we'll have a recess in this case until, September 30th, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Enjoy your time off.
Yep.
I'll be at the State Judicial Conference. Enjoy your time. You may recess. Counsel, anything else today in light of the fact we're going to be gone for a week?
Your Honor, no, I was just going to ask, could the bailiff perhaps just remind them not to watch media and things like that? Because I'm a little concerned that there could be some of that. Just to
She
make
will.
sure. Okay, thank you. And the only other thing I was going to indicate on the record is we did look into, our detective was able to reach the two doctors that for reference this morning, we're working on attempting interviews. There's some scheduling difficulties, but we will work with defense on that. But it sounds like that can happen, the interviews, and the records I don't know, but the interviews definitely.
We appreciate that, Your Honor. And Your Honor, I don't foresee anything, but just in case there is a legal issue that we might need some clarification on, is the court going to be back towards the end of the week, did I hear? Do you have a
Yes.
hearing here?
Yeah.
Which day is that?
I'll be back in the office, I'll be back here on Thursday.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else today, then?
Not from the defense, Your Honor.
All right, you may take the defendant.